probably know me from there. I don't know if you do or not. Do I have my thing? I don't have it. I used to have like a little graphic thing. Anyway, I don't know what happened to it, but betterquestionsemail.com. That's where I am. Look, I wanted to talk a little bit about man with a hammer syndrome. And look, I am you probably tell from the background of this shot, right? A relatively nerdy person. I like to read. I love ideas, right? I love the feeling of figuring out something new or coming up with a new tool, right, that I can use. And one of the dangers of being a, sort of like a well-read, smart person. I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm saying if you are watching this video, you are probably smart. I have had the distinct pleasure of interacting with very, very smart people online. And if you're watching this video, it means you're somewhere in my ecosystem and you're probably smart, right? So here's the thing. The thing about being a smart person is that you have the capacity to lie really well, to fool yourself into thinking you are objective, to thinking you are right, and to go out and to find enough evidence for pretty much anything that you want to believe that your argument and position feels unassailable. And I say this, I do this to myself all the time. I will talk myself into a position that is then very hard to get out of because I've done so much digging, so much intellectual labor to make sure that, well, yeah, that person had a decent argument, but here's why you shouldn't have to listen to them because they are invalid because X, Y, Z. It's very easy to do this. And man with a hammer syndrome is this particular case of this tendency that you get this kind of cool idea, this tool, this mental model. It is appealing to you. It resonates with you, and you become so skilled at wielding this tool, this idea, this mental framework, that you then turn it on every single problem you face, whether or not it has anything to do with what you're talking about. A good example of this is, and I've done this, right? The personal example is like the 80-20 principle. The 80-20 principle. Incredible book, the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch, I think. In any case, really great idea. Basically, it's power law distribution. 20% of all Italian farmers owned 80% of the land. And so you get this idea that like, hey, by focusing on the 20%, you can do significantly less work and get massive results. It's a very powerful mental model. And I've used this mental model multiple times. And I was in an argument with someone online because, of course, you got to do that. And they're saying, they're throwing 80-20 around this idea. They're like, well, 20% of these people, blah, blah, blah. I think it was literally like they were saying like 20% of men date 80% of the women, right? And I was like, maybe. I was like, why are you assuming that's a power law distribution? Do you know that? And their response was, well, everything is an 80-20 relationship. And I was like, no, it isn't. Then what's the bell curve? Right? So in any case, the specific doesn't matter. But this is an example of someone is saying, hey, this is an idea, and I'm going to slam this idea into every problem, and that's going to then warp my view of reality. I just read, before I jumped on this call, which is why I'm talking about it, right? I just read this article from someone that says, they're talking about white supremacist culture, white supremacy culture in business. And I am very amenable and sympathetic to issues of white supremacy culture, and I think that's a real thing. And they went on to describe the things that they then said were white supremacy culture. And one of the things was, well, the person in power doesn't like to be criticized. And they view criticism of people in power, view criticism as an attack. And you know, and I was like, I was on board, but I was like, that's a thing that's older than our entire country. You can find examples of people in power not liking to be criticized in Qing Dynasty China. Do you think they were a white supremacy culture? And again, the idea is a totally valid idea. They start out with a good idea, but you take it and you just try to smash everything into the one frame that you have, and it stops making sense. And so the idea is that it's not that 80-20 or white supremacy culture are bad ideas. Neither of them are bad ideas. In fact, both of them are incredibly valuable ideas that we need to understand and learn and use. But you got to understand and learn and use them the right time. Otherwise, you end up going down this weird rabbit hole where you're trying to 80-20 something that isn't an 80-20. Or you're trying to eradicate the white supremacy thought of people in India in like the year 400 AD. It just doesn't make any sense. This is something that everybody does. Everybody does this, right? It's very easy to see it in other people. And like all these things, I'm saying this because this is something that I do, right? I very much tend to be like, well, every problem can be solved by logic. Every problem can be solved by statistical analysis, yada, yada, yada. It ain't true. In fact, one of the best things about learning about game theory, which is something I read about recently, was that, oh, right, like you can't statistically analyze yourself out of every single situation. That's a mental model. It's very valuable. But if you use it in the wrong time, you end up going completely off the rails. So just remember, no matter how enamored we are of our ideas, no matter how right we are in certain situations, not every situation needs a hammer. Remember, this is the saying. To the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But every problem isn't a nail. I hope that makes sense. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. If you think I'm wrong, think I'm an idiot, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Cheers. Bye-bye.